Okay.
Is anyone talking? I can't really hear anything.
Yeah, I can't hear anything either. I presume no one's talking, but I can't hear anything either.
Okay, thank you for letting me know.
We were waiting for the first video to be shown.
What we don't want for sure is that today's affordability crisis turns into or becomes tomorrow's availability crisis. We are in the midst of a global food crisis. You know, right now, more than 50 countries have food inflation of more than 15% year on year. This is troublesome, not only for the poor countries, but also for rich countries. Now, this is really important. You know why? Because we, sitting in vast economies, we spend maybe 10-15% of our income on food. They, on a good day, spend like 50-60% of their income on food. We need to make sure that millions upon millions of people, not in one, not in two, but in dozens of countries, have access to affordable food in 2022, but also in 2023 and going forward. There are plenty. I think it's about time we start putting them into practice.
What else is going to happen in the next 12 months? What cyclones and hurricanes and other natural disasters are we facing? So I know we've got to reevaluate where we are and what we need to do, but I know one thing. If we back off the financial support on food security, it will cost 1,000 times more because of destabilization, military operations, mass migration. We've learned from experience that it costs more when we don't come in and address food security right. But anyway, Boris, I know there's no good news in there, there's not, but there is hope out there. And the women and men at this conference are the type of leaders that I think are now beginning to realize food security is a global crisis, and we've got to get ahead of it. Because you don't have food security, you're not going to have peace. You're just not going to have peace at all. What else is going to happen in the
The screen disconnected on my end.
Welcome to the Committee on Teaching About the United Nations CTON webinar on hunger. Hunger, many causes, many solutions, actions by the UN and partners. I am Anne-Marie Carlson, Chair of CTON, here to present some key groups and individuals who have been focusing on hunger. CTON members have done the necessary research and made the decisions so we could present some very special speakers, along with their rather unique efforts and projects. You'll be hearing about the effects on students and their education, along with what we feel are successful strategies for improvement. We're very pleased to have Ramu Damodaran, CTON Honorary Advisor, as the moderator for this meeting. You'll meet him a little bit later. He'll be part of many of today's presentations. We've already shown 2 short videos relating to the UN's World Food Program, WFP, and now we're moving on to our first speaker, Sally Amelina Muzamil, whose lifelong mission has been to fight hunger globally and to save and transform lives. And Sally has been hard at work on this, first of all in her home country of Indonesia, with the tsunamis and earthquakes there, and then in Syria, but also wherever in the world the need has occurred. So since I lived and worked in Indonesia for a few years, please permit me to say Selamat Datang, welcome, and Selamat Siang, good afternoon to Sally. Thank you, Sally, and please talk with us.
Terima kasih, Anne-Marie. Thank you, Anne-Marie. Good afternoon, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here. Thanks, Siton, for having me today, and to all of you who are joining us in this session. I sincerely appreciate the opportunity to talk to a group of people who evidently cares about the issue that we will be discussing today, which is hunger. As Anne-Marie mentioned, my name is Sally Muzamil. You can call me, I can go by Sally. I am a humanitarian working with the World Food Program, connecting today from New York City, where I currently based since the past 18 months. But before that, I have been mainly serving in the field, at country, at sub-regional and regional levels, in various contexts where WFP works, from development settings to conflict settings, countries hit by natural disasters or protracted conflicts. So it has been quite a sobering career with WFP. As also mentioned, I started in my native country, Indonesia. Back then, a bit of a history of how I ended up with this organization. On Boxing Day of 2004, maybe many of you may recall or not, my country, along with few other, were hit by a major earthquake, which was followed by tsunami. Back then, it was entirely unprecedented, waves up to 100 feet high on the Indian Ocean. The disaster led to unimaginable destructions and more than 200,000 people killed. And the rest is history. Back then, I was very young, fresh out of college. And I remember until now, I had a constant urge to do something. I felt troubled for the people affected, the mothers, the fathers, children who lost their families, their homes, almost everything, and really was in deep shock and did not know what to do. So a lot of humanitarian organizations came in immediately. There was a tsunami or a pouring of attention, global attention. A lot of help came in, including from the World Food Program. So, and I was met with the opportunity to join the organization for its tsunami response. We work day in, day out to bring food to the affected communities and supporting the government in its disaster response, as well as preparedness for future disasters. The tsunami was not it. It was followed by subsequent flooding, earthquakes, and soon after I joined, I think like a year after I joined WFP, there was also another earthquake that hit Yogyakarta. And Marie, you may know the area, that left the area flat. And I was deployed as a first responder, and that, you know, that kind of work actually led me to continue working for WFP, and being humanitarian became my calling, so to speak. Like there to support people affected by drought, climate change, conflict, and all that. Now, we just saw a clip talking about global food crisis. Let's talk a little bit of what that is. I'm going to share you a few figures just for you to have a picture what we're talking about. Today, up to almost 1 billion, so 828 people, which is 1 in every 10 of the world's population, go to bed hungry every night. And this is not hungry, grumble in your stomach. This is hungry of not knowing where the next meal will come. And WFP estimates in some of our operations where we are present and data is available, more than 345 million people are facing high levels of food insecurity. And this is not just a regular number. This number is 200 million more compared to just 3 years ago. So back in 2019, before COVID, we had 145 million people facing high levels of food insecurity, or what we call acute food insecurity. Now we are talking about 345 million people. 30 million children suffer from acute malnutrition. Later on, we will have our colleague from UNICEF who will talk more about the malnutrition. And you would wonder why hunger keeps increasing. And unfortunately, I think most of us know the reason, but very unfortunate, those causes have been there quite for a while. It is because we are witnessing a deadly combination of conflict, economic shocks, climate extremes, and soaring prices of food and fertilizers. For too many across the world, millions of people, food is simply out of reach. And WFP, alongside partners, is working day and night to respond to the hunger crisis. Now, you've heard about WFP, you've heard me saying about WFP, but what is it? Who is WFP, or how does it do its work to help tackling hunger worldwide? As a quick primer, WFP is the world's largest humanitarian organization working on the front lines of emergencies, and the mission is to support zero hunger. I'm privileged to be one of WFP's 22,000 employees worldwide, and the majority of the employees are based in the field. Some 90% are based in the field. WFP's food assistance aim to save lives in emergencies and change lives in contexts where food security is at risk. Last year alone, we supported around 160 million people in over 120 countries and territories where we are present. And more than 50% of those were women and girls. We work on the front lines of the climate crisis, which has been recurring and very much felt by everyone. And we assist them with helping communities to prepare also before disaster hits, because there is an early warning system. Oftentimes we know when climate extremes are happening. So we also, in addition to responding, we also help with the preparedness side. We are also the largest provider of school feeding in the world. I'm sure you're all very familiar with school feeding. And our school meals reach 15 million children globally. And as you may be familiar, its main aim is to improve nutrition and their access to education, which oftentimes are not readily or easily accessible in many contexts across the globe. We also address malnutrition from the early stage of a child's life. We are talking about the first 1,000 days being critical, providing support to millions of women and children worldwide. And we also, the way we provide assistance, the way WFP provides assistance is done in many different ways. From in-kind, where we give physical food, and that's only when market is not available, people have no access to commodities, then we bring the food to them, as in the old days, and where the market is available and the infrastructure is feasible, we even provide digital assistance to allow them to purchase food of their choice from the market. So wherever they are, however the situation, WFP tries to respond, help tackling hunger alongside partners, governments, NGOs, and the private sector, general public, to optimize our efforts to overcome hunger. Maybe also, in addition to as humanitarian organization, one thing that has been also the backbone is we have a vast supply chain network. What is its logistics capability, which enables us to rapidly go into a crisis area to bring food and to bring life-saving food assistance, immediately deploying food that we have been prepositioning in many of the warehouses and hubs. We also have specialized centers for innovation and development of hunger solutions. So not only we, alongside partners, provide assistance in traditional ways, but we are embracing innovation, digital age to make sure the way food assistance is provided is done in optimized manner. And maybe some of you may know, back in October 2020, in the midst of, at the beginning of the COVID, well, not very the beginning, but in the midst of the COVID pandemic, WFP was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for our role, the work that we do, particularly in bringing life-saving relief in emergencies and using food assistance to build peace, stability, and prosperity for people recovering from conflict, disasters, and the impact of climate change that we continue to witness. Working with WFP has brought me to many places. Anne-Marie was already laying out the places I've worked in, and during those journey, I met with mothers, children, fathers, young people who are really oftentimes relying only on food assistance to survive, and that made us humanitarian workers continue the journey, because it's really becoming a way of life to help improve their welfare and resilience. Currently, we are on the ground responding to the earthquake that hit Syria and Turkey just less than a month ago. We're also in places where conflict has been raging for many years, and unfortunately it seems to be the situation seems to be just getting worse moving forward. So we count on everyone's support to continue this work collectively. Anne-Marie and Ramwell and here, but happy to respond to any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sally. That was a remarkable tour d'horizon of the work that really the world's leading humanitarian organization in this field has been undertaking. And I think the point you made about hunger being possibly the most intimate of human experiences. And I think of that particularly today, the 3rd of March, because it was on this day in 1939 that the father of my nation, India, Mahatma Gandhi, began a hunger strike against British rule in India. And he did that very savvily because he recognized that by attacking his own body, by depriving it of nutrition and nourishment, he was making a political point for the masses in India to join, and a point that would not be lost on our colonizers. And it's a pleasure for me now to move to a speaker who has experience in my own country, India, and particularly working on the sector, Sally, that you mentioned, early childhood, malnutrition at that point, and the necessity of linking school education with nutrition and nourishment in the form of midday meals. And I know we're going to come to that later in the program as well. But for the moment, I'd like to begin with a film clip from another UN agency, the United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, and its spokesperson, Harmonie Boucher, who works on early childhood nutrition on the prevention of stunting for young children. She's worked on health policy financing based in Mauritania and has, as I mentioned, worked on community health level projects and nutrition in India and on a broader sustainable development agenda in Switzerland. Harmonie, after our clip from UNICEF, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ramu, and hi everyone. I hope that you can see the presentation properly. It's showing well on my screen. All right, so it's a real pleasure for me to be part of this panel today. We do have a packed agenda, so I'm gonna jump right into it. And we're going to spend the next 10 minutes to sort of build on the video that we've just seen. I want to provide you with some background information to understand how and why we, with UNICEF, WFP, and other partners, at time we need to provide RUTF, and also unpack the whole concept of wasting that was touched upon during the video. But before diving in, I want to talk about the life cycle approach to nutrition that we have at UNICEF. Because at every stage of childhood, children have unique nutritional needs, influences, risks, and eating behaviors. And our data shows that at all age, most children are not eating diets with enough nutrients or diversity. They are eating foods that are containing too much sugar, salt, and fat. And that presents a lot of risks, and that can lead to one or more forms of malnutrition. There is stunting, micronutrient deficiencies, overweight and obesity, and what we're going to talk about today, wasting. All those conditions can affect school performance. They will affect as well lifelong economic opportunities, and they will present health risks for everyone into adulthood. And as Sally presented just before, we're focusing for wasting prevention on the first 1,000 days, meaning the conception of the child to the second year of their life, because it's a unique window of opportunity. This is when we can prevent and act on adequate maternal nutrition during pregnancy and during lactation. This is when we can also work on early and exclusive breastfeeding, age-appropriate complementary foods and feeding practices. And this is also when we can reinforce access and use to essential nutrition and health services. And so why is it so important? Why am I talking about children that are under 2 years of age? Well, it's because something absolutely exceptional is happening in the first 2 years of a child's life. There are enormous physiological changes that are taking place between birth to 2 years of age. And when a child reaches their second birthday, their brain has grown up to 75% of their adult size. More than 1 million new neural connections have been formed at every second. Their body weight has quadrupled, their height has increased by 75%. Those changes are absolutely huge, and they require extremely high nutrient needs. So much so that actually children between 6 months and 2 years of age have greater nutrient needs per kilogram of body weight than at any other time in their lives, including adolescence. And this is also during this time, those first 2 years, that we see problem arising. And that's one of the reasons why we're focusing on this today for this presentation. Don't worry, I'm not going to delve into this slide too much. The reason why I'm showing this is to really show that the outcome of having a healthy and well-nourished 2-year-old child is not a standalone. And I think that Sally presented it very well. It's not just about food or access to food. It's comprised by a set of very complex determinants that are all connected and that are all influencing each other in a very complex way. What I mean by that is that when we're looking at nutrition, we cannot just look at this. And it's way more complex. And good nutrition is about knowledge of the caregiver, for example, of the mother, of the family. It's about the environment in which the child is brought up. It's about the norms. It's about income, as Sally presented as well. And it's about resources. Child malnutrition today has many faces, and new forces are also changing what we knew and are impacting the diets of children. In the case of wasting, you can see I've highlighted two causes. First, climate and environment change. This is what we see happening in the Horn of Africa as right now, and is in the Sahel region. They're having to live through longer span of droughts. And this is also the result of several failed rain seasons over the past years. We also have humanitarian crises that are caused by wars, like we see in Yemen, that are caused by natural disasters, like we saw in the example of Indonesia and Thailand earlier in the 2000s. This is what we see in Madagascar. This is what we see during the earthquake happening in Turkey and Syria, or the floods that happened in Pakistan. And now that I have set the scene and that we understand a bit better what can impact a child's diet, I will stop just for the time being on wasting. Wasting is the most life-threatening form of malnutrition. It does not only make a child look very thin, in some cases, the child may also suffer from a swollen stomach, face, feet, and limbs. And it's not just, again, about food, because this affects deeply the child's overall well-being. It weakens their immune system, their ability to fight viruses, bacteria, and fungi, and this leaves them extremely vulnerable to developmental delays, to disease, and at times death as well. And when those children are so underweight and so weak, they cannot eat normally, they cannot rely on family food. They need life-saving, ready-to-use therapeutic foods, as we saw in the video. That is this high-calorie nut paste, and is provided as a medical treatment. It is treatment, and that can literally mean the difference between life and death for them. Here you can see an overview, a snapshot overview of where the burden of wasting currently lies in the world. And what might surprise you is that children under 5 with wasting are not all concentrated in emergencies hotspots. Only a quarter of children suffering from severe wasting live in emergency context, which means that actually 3/4 of them are living in non-emergency context. And this snapshot shows it well, where we see the number of children under 5 affected by wasting. And in 2022, we're looking at about 47 million children under the age of 5 suffering from this form of malnutrition. Now, in the context of wasting, what does UNICEF and their partner are doing? The approach to eliminate wasting-related mortality in children comes from 2 main angles. First, we want to see less children suffering from wasting. And then second, we want to be able to treat more children that are suffering from wasting. So we do have a prevention side and we do have a treatment side. On the side of prevention, we are working to implement a package of essential actions. The package of essential actions need to be context specific, and it is adapted in each country. And at time within one country, we do see different forms of intervention and different mix of intervention to answer to the needs of children and families who are in need of intervention. For example, in Madagascar, in addition to having access to medical care, communities were reached with safe water, sanitation, and hygiene support. At the same time, vulnerable families were provided with humanitarian cash transfers. This means money to help them meet their most urgent needs. So with this very brief example, we see that we're working on several fronts, not just food, but everything that can contribute to protect a child from a form or more of malnutrition and help them survive and thrive. Increasingly at UNICEF, we're also training community health and nutrition workers, as well as mothers, fathers, families, to quickly detect malnutrition. And this is when we're using this little tape that you can see on screen, but you can also see on the photo. And when we're training caregivers and community health workers to use this tape, we have seen extremely good results for early referral of children that are suffering from wasting. How do you do it? You place this tape on the child's mid-upper arm circumference, and you look at the color that is red. So if you see green, the child is healthy and well-fed. And as you progress and as you're making the tape thinner and thinner, you see that you're changing color. And when the tape is in the red section, it means that the child is severely wasted and requires immediate treatment. So by doing this, mothers, families are able to know that their child is suffering from a deadly form of malnutrition and are able to refer their child for treatment. So treatment means that prevention has failed, and this is when we would like to see less and less treatment, but treatment is a must because we need to save those children's lives. And that's where UNICEF and partners are also actively working. For treatment, we're using what you saw in the video, this life-saving nut paste that is called RUTF, ready-to-use therapeutic food. Sadly, RUTF is not available everywhere. So what we're doing at UNICEF and with the support of partners as well, is that we're working to expand the access of treatment. Because we know that by providing treatment to 90% of all children with severe wasting, we would save almost 500,000 lives. So solutions are possible, and we are all committed to continue saving lives, but we need to continue investing, and we need to continue working to make it easily accessible for everyone who needs it. That is it for me today. I hope you understood at least a little bit more about the complex nature of wasting and the context in which we are using this therapeutic food. Thank you very much. And I included some resources that you can access if you have more questions. And then I'm also available in the Q&A box if you have any follow-up questions. Over on my side, back to you, Ramu. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Albany. And just to say that we'll make the resources that you've so thoughtfully put together available to all registrants later. And that was such a powerful image, Albany, that when we talk of breath, which is really the source of energy in life, and the thought of a child having to use all that energy just to breathe, that is a powerful metaphor which I think will stay with us long after this discussion. Thank you for that. We titled this program about the United Nations and its partners, and we've had two very important vignettes from the United Nations, UNICEF just now and the World Food Programme to begin. And now I'd like to bring in one of the many critical partners in our global endeavor. And this is Mary's Meals, a global charity that provides meals for more than 2.2 million children amongst the world's poorest. The founder and chief executive officer of Mary's Meals is Magnus McFarlane Barrow. And he was drawn to this because of his realization that nutritious food attracts children to the classroom where they can gain the education necessary to move out of poverty. Magnus was named one of Time magazine's 100 most influential people in the world in 2015. His first book was titled The Shed That Fed a Million Children. He was originally a fish farmer in Argyll in Scotland, from where he joins us this afternoon. And he and his brother were so moved by reports of the Balkans War in 1992, they took leave from their jobs and traveled down to Bosnia with aid and distributed it. And that idea of bringing aid, bringing supplies to those who need it most, informs the global venture he leads today. Magnus, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ramu, and thank you for inviting me into this meeting. Yes, as you said, Ramu, I got involved in this work in what was meant to be a one-off response to the crisis that was occurring in the early 90s in the former Yugoslavia. I didn't intend to make this my life's work at all. My brother and I, over a pint of beer one night in our local pub, were talking about a terribly moving news report we'd seen about how refugees were suffering in Bosnia-Herzegovina. We launched a little appeal just asking for basic supplies, and we drove them to a refugee camp. And I came back thinking I'd done my good deed, and it didn't quite work out that way because people kept giving. I found it hard to stop them giving, and so I gave up my job, and I began driving trucks back and forth during that war. And the work grew, and we got involved in various emergency responses and other kinds of work too. We got involved in primary healthcare projects. We were rebuilding schools that had been destroyed during the war, all sorts of things. No real theme or focus. And the first 10 years of this work we did under the name of Scottish International Relief. And then 10 years after that first little effort, this work of Mary's Meals was born. And again, it was born a little bit unexpectedly, again, not planned by me. We were in Malawi that year, and we were working there for the first time on an emergency feeding program. That was a year of terrible food insecurity across southern Africa. Many millions of people facing starvation in Malawi in particular. And so we were carrying out a very simple emergency project in some of the villages there. And during the course of that work, I met this family. They lived in one of the villages, and when I first met them, I learned that the father of the family had just died. And the mother, she was called Emma, was dying at this point too. She had HIV/AIDS. And when I first visited her, she was surrounded by her 6 children. And she said to me, you know, there's nothing left for me now except to pray that somebody will look after my children when I'm gone. And I began talking to her oldest child sitting beside her. He was called Edward. He was 14 years of age. And at one point in the conversation, I asked Edward, what's your hope? What's your ambition in life, Edward? And he said to me, I'd like to have enough food to eat, and I would like to be able to go to school one day. And that was it. That was the extent of his ambition at 14 years of age. And in the years before that, I'd encountered other children who were missing school because of poverty, because of hunger. But that answer that Edward gave me that day really made me think about that in a new way. The fact that millions of children like him are missing school because they are working, because they're begging, because they're doing whatever they need to do to survive, to put food on the table. And as we thought about that, we also began to think about that potential solution. And of course, it's not an original idea. Many organizations are involved in school feeding. But all our experience, that 10 years of working in very impoverished communities, led us to this conviction that so many things begin there. If we're serious about development, never mind that immediate need of the hungry child, surely ensuring that children are eating and in school and gaining that education, without which there is no ladder of poverty, out of poverty, what else is going to work? So I think the way we began the very first Mary's Meals projects was key to why it's worked and why it's grown. We knew from the beginning that this would only work if it was genuinely owned by the local community, that no solutions work if they're imposed from outside. You know, so often I think we can come up with solutions in a faraway office and then impose them on the community. And in my experience, that never works. The things that work are owned, genuinely owned by the local community. So we had these meetings in Malawi that year where we shared this idea about ensuring every child could receive a meal every day at school, but that we would only go forward with that idea if the local communities wanted to take responsibility for it and were willing to volunteer time to cook and serve those meals. And immediately the people at those meetings said, yes, this is what we want for our children. This is what our children need. The other key part from the beginning was a strong commitment to, as much as possible, procuring the food locally, to support the local farmer, to support the local economy. In Malawi, that became a dish called lakuni pala. It's a corn soya blend, fortified with minerals and vitamins, and so we began. Volunteers in those communities, and well, in one particular community, a small school of about 200 children, began serving the food that we'd procured locally with funds we'd raised in different parts of the world. And immediately we could see this wasn't just a nice idea, it was something that was really going to work, because almost immediately children who'd never been to school before began coming. Children who used to come just some days began coming every day. Over a longer period of time, some months, the teachers began to report to us this very dramatic improvement in academic performance. Not surprisingly, before school feeding, children in those communities almost never ate before school, very often walked long distances to school, and were then expected to spend a school day without eating. So of course, children were missing many days through sickness and fatigue. Children many days leaving school early because of hunger. So we saw that this simple thing, the provision of one meal, was really transforming that school community. And then the next school along the road in the neighbouring village came to us and said, can we have Mary's Meals as well, please? And we said, yes. And then the next one and the next one. And so it went on. So today in Malawi, we're feeding just over 1 million children every day. That's around 25% of the primary school age population in that country. And we're also serving Mary's Meals in 18 other countries around the world. And we have a very strong focus on trying to be in the places where the need is very greatest and where we believe, therefore, our impact will be greatest. So we're in places like South Sudan, we're in Tigray in Ethiopia, we're in Haiti, we're in India, we're in Madagascar. So 18 countries, very different cultures, very different environments, but always that same thing: local volunteers cooking and serving locally produced food. And as the years go by, and as this work's growing, so that over 2.4 million children are eating Mary's Meals today, we see more and more some of the beautiful fruits from this very simple thing that we do. We see, for example, how just the creation of a year-round market for that food, our need to purchase that food, stimulates local food production in all sorts of interesting ways. We heard about, about how food security has to be there to bring about peace, and I totally agree with that. I think, Ramu, it was yourself that was making that comment, and I really believe in that, and we've seen examples of that in South Sudan, where communities and people who've been soldiers for many years putting down their weapons literally to begin farming as part of a project that exists because the food is bought year round by Mary's Meals to serve the children in those same communities. Recently, I was in Kenya, revisiting a group of women there who we'd first met about 6 years ago. And at that point, they were just starting a cooperative. They were living in desperate poverty, and they pooled their resources. They had $17 each that they pooled at the beginning. And we met them at that point, and we said to them, we can buy your food year round. And we came to an agreement on that. And when I was back visiting them a few months ago, I was just overwhelmed by their story. They now employ 60 people. They're not just growing food, they're trading food across Kenya, and they're supplying several hundred of the schools in which Mary's Meals provides school feeding. So we see all sorts of other benefits from school feeding. We also, one of the benefits of getting older, as I am now, is it's wonderful to go back to the communities where we began. 20 years ago, we served the first meals in Malawi now. and to meet young people, young adults who will say to us, you know, I never would have gone inside a school if it wasn't for those meals. I might not be alive today if it wasn't for those meals. And I know so many of them. There's a young lady there called Veronica, who recently graduated from university with a degree in education. She's now teaching in college. We were making a documentary with her a couple of years ago, and it was only then I learned that Veronica was amongst that very first group of 200 children we began feeding in 2002. She was an orphan. She describes how she was raised by her older sisters. She describes how sometimes they would go for as long as a week without a proper meal in their home. And she would say she certainly never would have gone inside her local school if it wasn't for the promise of that meal. So we see this works, and not just anecdotally, not just through that wonderful experience of meeting and knowing those young people whose lives have been changed. We have devoted a lot of time and effort to collecting the impact. What happens to enrollment? What happens to attendance? What happens to progression through school? What happens to academic performance? Other things as well, based on surveys before and after Mary's Meals, around the well-being of children and those communities, happiness in school. I think something we underestimate sometimes in terms of hunger and its impact is the stress it causes in people's lives, the stress that parents endure when they don't know how they're going to feed their children tomorrow or next week, the stress of the children themselves experience when they don't know where their next meal is coming from. So that promise, that guarantee of a meal every day changes things in so many different ways. And most of all, it opens up that opportunity for a basic education for all. So, you know, it's something I never would have believed at the beginning when we began feeding those 200 children, that we would be feeding 2.4 million children today. But really, if I'm honest, I feel like we've only just begun. There are 60 million children out of school today because of poverty and hunger. And that's a scandal in this world of plenty, in this world where we produce more than enough food for all of us. You know, and when we talk as a global community about zero hunger, I can't help but ask myself if we're serious about that, if we can't even make a commitment to ensuring that every child in this world can at least eat one meal every day in their place of education, because that's possible. And I'm not sure what else works in terms of development if we don't get that right. I'm not saying that just on its own, that's everything. There are so many other important things to address, and we've heard some great examples of that in this meeting. So of course it doesn't stand alone, and we don't stand alone, but that's essential. We have to get that bit right if those other parts of development are going to work, and that vision might be realized. So thank you very much for inviting me on this call today, just to share a little bit about Mary's Meals. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bagdis, and thank you particularly for that reference to really the heart of UN partnership, that we are not a global organization imposing solutions, but working with solutions where they can be created at the human personal level. And it occurs to me that you were as old when you first went to Bosnia as Peter Brosnan is now, and he's a member of the board of directors of CTON. He's really the whiz behind our technical arrangements for each of these events, but also the voice of a generation slightly younger than ours about what they want to be taught and how they can live that teaching. So, Peter, may I ask you to introduce our next speaker?
With pleasure, Ramu. I'd like to say thank you to all the speakers who have come before. It has been an honor and a privilege to listen to all the wonderful work you do, and I'm sure I speak for us all when I say thank you. It is an absolute honor to introduce our next video and speaker, Teens for Food Justice and Alicia Antonetti. I'll give you a little brief bio of each first. So TFFJ, or Teens for Food Justice for short, is catalyzing a youth-led movement, so all young people feeding themselves, to end food security in one generation through high-capacity school-based hydroponic farming. So very clean too. They partner with 19 schools so far in New York and Denver to produce and to distribute and produce 45,000 pounds of student-grown produce each year. And they're planning on expanding in New York, Denver, and Miami to bring their total anticipated impact to 13,000 students locally and 110,000 pounds of produce grown nationally. So Alicia, I'm going to show the video first, and then the floor will be all yours. So,
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Once I walked into the door and I saw all, like everything, I was inspired. I was so amazed that you don't have to grow herbs outside, but you could grow it inside.
We never thought that, like, as kids, that this day would come that we can, like, help give to our community.
Teens for Food Justice is striving to eradicate food insecurity and the resulting negative impacts that we see on health in our low-income communities of color. These are youth-led, community-based solutions where we partner with schools and community-based organizations to build high-capacity hydroponic farms that are capable of growing as much as 10,000 pounds of produce per year.
As part of the class, students also built the actual rigs themselves. So you have kind of not only the science of growing the food, but like, how can I create the structures that will allow me to grow the food?
There are so many career opportunities that are available to our kids as a result of their exploration in this program.
Students can work on greenhouse management, on hydroponic management, on irrigation systems. They can also, if the more food activism piece is interesting to them, there's different roles in food justice and in local government that would be available to them with the work that we're doing here.
Teens for Food Justice is able to provide students with the leadership skills to go out and be comfortable advocating for change in their society.
1654 with the following amendments.
So I just applaud you and both of you for your great, powerful advocacy.
Because if you look around our community, we don't have any healthy options to eat.
It's not that easy to find like fresh produce everywhere.
I worry about it because like there's not enough healthy food going around.
You guys had different samples of different leafy greens, things that I've never tasted before myself, and that you've introduced us to.
It's really amazing because I helped grow them, so it's like me tasting my work and like what I could do.
To see the kids' joy of learning, a hands-on curriculum, really thriving and feeling like they have agency and purpose in their community makes me know that we're doing the right work.
So we're like saving this community, you know, like that's rich. It sounds crazy though, we're just having this experience, but that's the possibility of having this hydroponic farm, that's what it can do.
Teens for Food Justice is great. It should happen in all schools so kids can have this experience like I did.
The whole program is like the best.
It makes me feel proud of myself.
All right, Aaliyah, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and all the wonderful work you've done?
Hi. So, my name is Alicia, and I'm just gonna run through my speech because it basically answers the questions. So, hello everyone. My name's Alicia Antonetti, and I'm from Brownsville, Brooklyn, but I was also born and raised in the Bronx. I come from a Puerto Rican and Italian household. Also, my parents are Puerto Rican and Italian too. I go to Brownsville Collaborative Middle School, and I'm also 7th grade student president. I joined the student council because I wanted more control over the change that occurs within our school and community. I also remember when I was little, I was all about, you know, feeding the homeless, for example. Like when I used to be on the train, I used to train travel a lot, and I would see people, you know, asking for money or a snack or something. If I had it, I would, hand it to them. When I was in the 5th grade, I also attended a Brownsville Collaborative Middle School orientation. I knew that this was the school for me. By that, I mean that this was the place to help me pursue my passions, even though I knew that I had more growth within me. So as we all know, Brownsville is a food desert. As an advocate of the community, I would love to change that, but change only happens when we put in work. I started working in the school's hydroponic farm because I really enjoyed growing plants. Something else that sparked my interest was the scholars who worked there. The scholars who volunteered there were really nice and welcoming, and I even made a new friend. So what also piqued my interest in food justice work is the Teens for Food Justice Brownsville Collaborative Middle School Hydroponic Farm. I also joined this hydroponic farm for a year, and during that year, it showed me that the food we pass down can not just be given to the school, but also the community. So I decided that I could expand this generosity to my community. Today, I will also love to talk about the community fridge and how ecstatic it makes me that other people support my passions and goals. It makes me feel like there's a village backing me up. In the 6th grade, towards the end of the school year, I was running for the position as 7th grade student president. One of my main goal campaigns were the community fridge. The hydroponic farm is also what sparked this idea. The farm motivated me because the majority of the things we grow are sent off to the school cafeteria so that our scholars can be served fresh salads. But what I observed is that the scholars were not consuming the salad. Considering the fact that not many students, consume the school salad, I decided that it should go to people who, needed it more. Of course, I wasn't going to take salad off the menu. So that's why I decided that I was just going to split the food with the farm, even with the fridge and the school, split it 50-50. I knew that this would work because not only is it flexible, but everybody can get fed in the process. As I was sharing my plan with BCMS staff, they loved it and they encouraged me to continue on with my vision. I wanted to sincerely thank everyone who's helped me prepare for this. In October, I got invited to do community service. I love the idea of just taking a couple of hours out of my school day to help clean the community with my fellow classmates. During community service, I met Dr. Kirkland. I was told to inform Dr. Kirkland about my plan with the community fridge. Dr. Kirkland gave my school $250 out of his own check for the community fridge. I was very happy that Dr. Kirkland liked the idea of the community fridge, and I started communicating with him throughout emails. At first, I didn't want to email him because I understood that he was a busy man, being that he is the district superintendent. So once the fridge was received, everybody was ecstatic about it and couldn't wait for the ceremony. I invited the news station. There was loads of important people there. And the ribbon cutting was very exciting for me too. It's really safe to say that it didn't feel real, but it made me happy to see how many people loved and supported my idea. Shortly after the fridge made an appearance, it got stolen. The community and I didn't consider this as a bad thing. In fact, we saw it as a positive because we never know someone's situation. For example, what if that person needed it or the money that they received when they stole it? I was a bit disappointed at first, but then I thought outside of the box. Some of you may just know me for the community fridge, but I will also like to inform you on my background too. I grew up a little underprivileged when I was 8. My family and I had to move to temporary housing due to some life issues. My 2 years in temporary housing, it truly opened my eyes to see that few people had enough to eat. I also got to see for myself what poverty looks like, and I realized that not many people didn't know where their next meal was coming from. And some advice that I would love to give to the youth is that whatever you set your mind to, you can do it. People told me that all the time when I was younger, but I really did not believe it. But when it came to realizing one of my true passions, I decided to take their advice. I truly set my mind to providing this fridge, and now we have not one, but 2. And this is just the beginning. My future goals for combating hunger involves helping to eliminate hunger through more community-led events. Also, I would like to collaborate with some of our local community farms. Another piece of advice that can be for everyone is to keep pushing. We can always get stuck in our work, as it may be school or a job. Those things can get stressful sometimes, but no matter how stressful things get, you will always still have to do them. So that's why I say it's okay to take a mental health break or talk to someone. Thank you for listening.
Alicia, that was absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much for your wonderful words of wisdom and advice that I'm sure we all appreciate and take to heart. I now hand it back over to Ramu to introduce the rest of our wonderful lineup.
Thank you so much, Peter, and thank you, Alicia. I'd now like to introduce a vignette from an organization that the former Secretary General of the United Nations, Ban Ki-moon, established in 2017 when he had concluded his term of office, the Ban Ki-moon Center for Global Citizens. It's meant to empower women and young people to achieve development goals. And just last week, Mr. Ban, in an interview, spoke about smallholder farmers who in sub-Saharan Africa and Asia produce 80% of the food, but receive only 1.7% of climate finance. He described it as irrational and injustice. And let's have a look at what the Ban Ki-moon Center is doing in this global cause. What is it that drives a global champion? If I had to choose one word, it would probably be concern. A concern for a world that you may not directly experience yourself, but which you feel instinctively you are responsible for. And that brings me to our next speaker, Kirk Pritchard, who is Vice President of Programs at Concern Worldwide, managing the team responsible for all US-funded programs and policy at Concern, a portfolio which totals more than $70 million in 18 countries. He has trained over 1,000 humanitarian professionals in different settings in 21 countries faced with food and conflict emergencies. He describes himself as a proud native of New Jersey, which I can relate to. He received his master's degree in international humanitarian action from the University of Groningen in the Netherlands. Kirk?
Thanks so much for that. And I think my exact words were the great state of New Jersey, but we'll let it go for there. Hey everyone, great to kind of see you virtually here. My name is Kirk. I work for programs on the programs team here at Concern Worldwide. I'm more of a visual person, so I'm going to pull up a couple of slides. Don't worry, they're quick and they're mostly pictures as well. So Ramo, can you just nod your head if you can see this? Is that good? Yeah, you good? Great. All right. So Concern Worldwide. We are an international humanitarian aid organization. And really quick, who we are before I jump into what I'm talking about is the thing that kind of sets us apart from a lot of other organizations is kind of where we work. So Concern has like this laser-like focus on conflict and fragile affected states here. So as you can see by this map here, almost every single country that Concern works in, it has an element of conflict, hunger, climate, all kind of meshed together there. So like everything from North Korea, we're one of the only organizations working in North Korea, to Central African Republic, Haiti, Ukraine, Syria, etc. So that kind of sets us apart. But I was given the the interesting, I could say, assignment of closing us up here with some optimistic news or like on an upbeat, which is pretty hard when one of the things I was also told to do was talk about the state of the world. Because I mean, to be frank, I'm not going to beat around the bush here. The state of the world isn't the world's greatest right now. You just need to turn on the news or go on the internet there to kind of see that. One of the things that really sets apart is the scale and scope of the humanitarian emergencies that are kind of battering the world today is immense. It's like nothing we've ever seen before. If you just look at this chart here, back in 2015, 1 in 95 people were in need of humanitarian assistance, you know, which is way too many, obviously. But if you look all the way up here at the end here, currently we're at 1 in 29 million people, or 29 people worldwide. 1 in 29 people worldwide are in need of humanitarian assistance. Over 250,000 people are in need of this life-saving humanitarian assistance. And obviously this is not a good trend line, especially because so many other indicators that we've seen over this time have gotten better. You know, the economy's gotten better, hunger's gotten better for the most part, and so many countries. So the fact that we've seen humanitarian assistance and these people that are in need of life-saving, amazing emergency support going up massively, like threefold here, isn't that? It's just not a good thing. And then you add on to that things like some of the emergencies going on that are today, like Ukraine. It's the 1 year anniversary, I think, like yesterday or 2 days ago of the conflict in Ukraine. One of the biggest displacement crises ever to happen. 6 million people essentially overnight were forced out of their home, like massive displacement, conflict, war, sexual violence, all types of bad things going on there. And then on the natural disaster side, just what was that, 3 weeks ago, the earthquake in Turkey, one of the biggest earthquakes to hit the region in 100 years. Some of these areas, 60% of the buildings have been destroyed or need of rehabilitation. Tens of thousands of people, unfortunately, killed by the earthquake. So it really isn't, you know, the world's greatest. And then to add kind of insult to injury, one of the areas that I work in the most is this region of the world called the Horn of Africa. And people have different definitions of it, but it's broadly speaking Kenya, Somalia, Ethiopia, South Sudan sometimes, et cetera, et cetera. And the thing that's going on in the Horn of Africa right now is one of the worst droughts that's ever hit the region. It's been essentially 6 years or 6 failed rains. So 6 failed rainy seasons there in the Horn of Africa. And what I always like to say about that is for our American colleagues, can you imagine if Nebraska went essentially 6 rainy seasons without any rain whatsoever, not a single drop of rain, what that would do to a country like America? It's really, no country, regardless of how it was or how it was beforehand, could kind of withstand this. And we're seeing some horrible aspects as a result of that. And adding insult to injury on this one, it is things like that war in Ukraine that you might be like, what did the war in Ukraine have anything to do with the Horn of Africa? But Ukraine and Russia were huge major food exporters. And that impacted the global supply chain and all these other things. You can see it right here. The total amount of wheat and things like that, about a quarter of the world's wheat came from Russia and Ukraine. And things have improved a little bit. The supply chains are getting better, but it absolutely has driven up prices in these areas. And on top of that, it's essentially sucked the air out of the room for humanitarian needs otherwise. So for example, 97% of Somalia's humanitarian need funds are unfunded right now. And that's because so much more money is going into these other countries like Turkey, like Ukraine, from these things that have more of the kind of media attention, et cetera. And as a result of these things, we have these horrifically bad statistics, like 1 million children under 5 could die as a result of this in the Horn of Africa. How is this possible in the year 2023? Like it absolutely should not be happening. I'm going to skip over some of the more depressing news, especially pictures of dead animals and things like that, because we don't need to see that on a Friday afternoon. But this chart here essentially shows that even as bad as all that can be, it can get worse. This is a picture. These are 2 maps of Somalia right here. For those of you that aren't huge geography buffs, this is Somalia right, and up here, Puntland, and then Somalia here. And this is what the level of food insecurity we're seeing. As my colleague said at the beginning, with the MUAC bans and those things that we're measuring severe acute malnutrition, we're looking at April to June. Again, if these rains don't come, almost the entire country of Somalia being in severe acute malnutrition status. It's absolutely staggering. And once you get to that level, I mean, the thing that goes unsaid, and I think we need to say it because it's reality, is that's when you get to the point where children are dying, pregnant and lactating women are dying of starvation, of not having food, of not having water. And again, I just think that it's completely not allowable in today's day and age that the richest the world's ever been, that we still have this kind of thing going on. Okay, all that being said, I know someone's sitting there being like, I thought you were supposed to be like closing us out on an upbeat note, Kirk. So here's my attempt to do this. And the one upbeat note I have on all this is, the thing is, we actually know the solutions. Like, there is common sense. Everyone's like talking drones and technology and all this other stuff, which are all great, you know, but we know what we need to do to solve malnutrition. We know what we need to do to end hunger worldwide. It's not magic, and it doesn't take huge amounts of resources. It doesn't take all these things. It's simple solutions that involve the community, as my other colleague was saying there, that get down to that grassroots level, that have basic things. And one of the things that proves this is we have this program called LEAF, Life-Saving Education and Assistance to Farmers. And this takes place in an area in the Horn of Africa called the Tana River region, which had some of the highest malnutrition rates in the region beforehand. And what it was a dual program. It was both the treatment of acute malnutrition, which my colleague was talking about earlier. So that's treating kids that are showing malnutrition, that are showing those signs of malnutrition. But then it's also trying to prevent that in the future via improved agriculture, things called climate smart agriculture. And as I said, it's really simple things. It's like using cover crops on top of your crops after the season. It's drip irrigation. It's better seeds, things like where the seeds are more resistant to drought. It's these very simple, straightforward things that have this massive impact. And as I said, it actually makes a huge difference. So during the worst drought in 40 years, so this is the worst drought the Horn of Africa has seen in 40 years, we've seen huge improvements in these areas. You can see it right here, massive improvements in terms of this. 50% of the farmers we're working on have more than enough land to feed themselves and their family and to put food out to market. And if you look at this next slide, 94% of the areas are consuming all the major food groups that they need to, and 77% of the county is consuming enough food. And again, 77 isn't 100, we want 100%, but it was only 25% before. So again, during the worst drought in 40 years, we've had a 50% increase in the amount of people that have enough food to eat. It's absolutely stunning. And again, this was not major things. These were easy, very cheap things that were going on in terms of agriculture. And one of the things I'll end on this kind of note, which is interesting, is this county that we were working in has required on government food assistance. So those are some of those WFP and FAO things you heard from the UN. You know, you see those pictures of the trucks dropping off wheat and things like that. For the last something like 30 years, every year they've been required, reliant on food assistance. This year, as a result, I would argue as a result of the program, was the first year these communities did not need food aid anymore. And again, during the worst drought in 40 years. So if we can do these kind of programs during the worst drought in 40 years, imagine what we could do during a normal year. Imagine how we could essentially cure hunger, make it so we don't need those MUAC bans you saw, make it so we don't have malnutrition going on anymore. And it's very much doable. Very final thing, just because I know we have so many teachers on board, I did want to flag that in addition to this, we have lots of SDGs going on. We have tons of resources as well. Concern does do some school work as well, where we have like teacher exercises and things like that as well. So if you wanted to check those out, go for it. Narmu, I'll hand back to you now.
Thank you so much, Kirk. And to go back for a moment to New Jersey and your state motto of liberty and prosperity, I think that's really what you've shown us in this presentation, how you can liberate the human being from hunger, from want, from need, and allow her to prosper. And we've really come full circle with that, beginning with the organizations that constitute the UN, to the work of individual humanitarian professionals, to the work that Magnus and his team have been doing, to what Alicia shared with us. And you're all a testament to the motto of another organization: together we make change happen. And that organization is the Hunger Project, which believes that ending hunger starts with people. So let's have a brief vignette from them before our director, Anne-Marie, closes the program.
Every day, millions of people go hungry. Yet hunger is not inevitable. It is the biggest resolvable problem in the world. Over the last years, the number of hungry people has declined considerably. But recently, hunger is increasing instead of decreasing. We need to stop this, because if we put our minds to it, ending hunger by 2030 is totally achievable. When you think of hunger, you probably think of a child during a war or in a disaster area. Yet only a few cases are caused by acute disasters. The vast majority are living in chronic hunger, the silent, invisible day-after-day condition of abject poverty. This often happens over many generations. But what if we can change it? The Hunger Project invests in people by unlocking their capacity, creativity and leadership, so they are the drivers in ending their own hunger. Hungry people are not the problem, they are the solution. They can make a difference because when given the opportunity, they're the ones achieving amazing results. The solution to ending chronic hunger is not about handouts or distributing food. These methods are unsustainable. Before long, hunger will just return. And hunger is not just about food. It's about health. It's about women's rights. It's about income. That's why the Hunger Project addresses all these facets together. In the rural areas of Africa, Asia and Latin America, hundreds of thousands of trained volunteers are working together to end hunger in their communities by mobilizing everyone, by starting with women, by engaging local government. After mentoring and coaching by the Hunger Project, communities continue on their own, becoming self-reliant. That is a sustainable solution. There are still millions of people living in hunger. We are at a critical moment. Together we can end hunger once and for all. Are you in?
To close, I'd like to start with a few thank yous to Ramu, our moderator, for sharing his good insights and his abilities with us all. To our speakers for so beautifully enlightening us on the needs that they see in the world and providing some solutions. Our very talented CTON members who have devoted themselves to the planning and production of this webinar. To all of you who have registered, and a special greeting to those who have once again joined the CTON webinars. Next, with this webinar being recorded, we do plan to have the link on our CTON website over the weekend so it can be shared with others. Or if you would like to watch it again, please do. We are hoping to have a conference at the UN come May, likely on children in conflict settings, and are awaiting room confirmations and co-sponsorships from a country. So do stay in touch with us. We hope you found this webinar enlightening and interesting, and do go ahead with some of these ideas that have been shared. So stay in touch. Thank you so very much.
Very well done. I think you got something there to be proud of.